Good morning, everyone. This is Michelle Patterson from Category Management Knowledge Group. Really excited to have you here today for our topic, Category Management Tactics and Analytics. We are going to go through a lot of information over the next hour, so we are going to jump right in. I'm actually going to start with a quick review of the go-to training controls in case you're not familiar with them, just to make sure that everybody has a great webinar experience today. So quickly, the user panel is very friendly. So from an audio perspective, hopefully you're hearing me right now, and you can see here that you can choose either telephone or mic and speakers option. If you choose telephone, it will give you the number and code in this panel here. In terms of your visuals and your screen, it should automatically adjust to whatever size of screen that you're working with, but if it is a little bit grainy or you're having any issues, you can go into your control panel and change your settings to 1024 by 762 to improve the look of the screen. You can also close the go-to training controls if you are working with just one screen. It helps to get them out of the way, so you can use this white arrow and a red box up here to help you close and open that screen. As well, there is a chat box on the bottom here, and this is an important one. Want to make sure that you ask any questions that you have throughout today's webinar, and please use this chat box, and again, you can open and control your, close your panel to be able to get at the chat box. For today's session, we have uploaded some materials into the materials section. If you were logged in early enough, you would have seen that first message. If you can go to the materials section and download the PDF that's in there, we will be walking through some exercises shortly where you'll need that. We also have a very large group today, so we have put everybody on mute. We do want this to be interactive and want to address your questions, so please use the chat box that I just showed you for any of those questions, and if we need to, we can unmute you individually to speak to ask those questions. We may put some of them off to the end of our discussion today, but please do ask any questions that you have. So just a quick introduction. If this is one of your first interactions with CMKG, we want to thank you for joining us today. This is our mission statement here, and it just talks about our passion for category management and for learning, and it really is part of everything that we do, and it's why we do these webinars publicly, and we're glad that you've decided to join us here today. I wanted to give you a quick picture of some of the training that we offer. So this is a list of our online courses and resources. So our full list from foundational to intermediate and advanced category management certified courses. We have some that are not certified. And I wanted to bring this up at the beginning because our category tactics and analytics topic today, we're actually going to be touching on some content from a number of these courses from both the foundational and the intermediate levels. And at the end of today's webinar, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more in detail and give you the opportunity to ask us some questions as well if you'd like to. So I'm going to jump right into the content. Like I said, we have an action-packed agenda. And here's what we're going to cover today about the category management tactics. We're actually breaking it out into first talking about what are the tactics and what is the strategic importance of those, and really for every function, not just for category management. And then we're going to go into my top 10 list of some of the most important things and facts and metrics to consider when analyzing the category tactics. So again, a top 10 list is a lot to cover in an hour, so let's get started. There's a lot of factors that influence a consumer's purchase decision, and it's driven by both retailer and manufacturer, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of these before. And as we think about category tactics, they really are some of those measures that influence consumer decisions. And so the ones that are highlighted on the top tend to be driven by manufacturer, and the ones on the bottom are the ones that are implemented by retailers. So we're really focusing on these sales tactics down here at the bottom. So we will be covering some examples across each of these tactics today. The reason why these tactics are important, and again, not just for category managers and those more analytically driven, but for every function, is because the tactics are what drive volume and share. They are the key drivers. They need to be monitored in order to understand how they impact the volume growth or decline within a category. And some tactics may have a bigger influence in one category over another. And so you'll see that as we go through our top 10 list, I've indicated that it's in no particular order because depending on the category, the retailer, and the specific nuances of what it is that you're looking at, some tactics and some tips might be more important than others. So again, in no particular order, this is the list of tactics that we're going to go through. Again, in the materials section of Go-To Training, if you haven't already gone in and downloaded it, there are some notes there that you can also print and take some notes as we go through this list of 10, and I will recap them again at the end. So this is your first quick look at the top 10 tips that we're going to walk through. We're going to start with assortment, and as I said, we're going to go through examples from each of the tactics. This top 10 list came from our experience both in practically applying category management and the work in our careers, but also in working with the retailers and manufacturer clients that we have over a number of years in teaching all of these topics and really seeing the ones that have the most impact in terms of being able to transform the way a business is strategically reviewed and managed and the results that we see coming out at the end. So some of these come from seeing great aha moments about metrics that really can have a lot of impact but haven't been leveraged with a particular company or whatever that might be. So again, that's where the top 10 list came from, and the insights are drawn from a number of different courses and training that we have and we offer. So the first tip that I'm going to share with you is to start your assortment analysis with a top-line analysis. There's many different ways to measure product assortment, which includes the ones that we see listed here, including the share per SKU, the number of listings, the share of listings. We look at ACV distribution, stores that are carrying the product. But it's really critical to start at the top line level to look at brand and segment perspective. And far too often we see that when we start with an assortment analysis, people jump right into the item level and go straight for that item rank and start analyzing some of the item level. But it's really critical to start so that you see where the bigger category opportunities may lie. So let's have a look at some of those key measures and what insights we can gather from them at that top line level. So here's a really simple look at share per SKU or share per item, and it's one of the productivity calculations that we look at a brand or segment level. So let's walk through an example here. So our total brand or segment share in this example for brand A is 30.6. So if we divide that by the number of SKUs for the brand, which is 17, we get a share per SKU of 1.8. So now that I have this share per SKU number, I can compare it across the brands to determine which brand is the most productive. So you can see that brand B actually, my screen's jumping ahead on me there. You can see that brand B actually has the highest share per SKU. So this means that each item in brand B carries a higher average share than brand A and brand C. So it is more productive than those other brands for this retailer. The second tip that I want to share with you is to leverage sales per point of distribution. This is one of my favorite measures by far, and as we look at trying to find opportunity in distribution. Again, it's not about jumping right into individual item performance. Once we have determined which brands are most productive and we've got some direction at that top level, we look at sales per point of distribution. So if you're familiar with this measure, you know how powerful it can be. If you're not, this is a great calculation to put in your arsenal. So what it does is it equalizes sales between items with different levels of distribution and highlights opportunities for distribution at an item level. So let's look at an example here. So if we have $1,000 in sales that is split between 87 points of distribution, it gives us a measure of 11.5 as the sales per point of distribution. So what does 11.5 mean? Is it a good or bad number? What does it really tell us? And it really depends. So like most metrics, you really do need to bring some perspective to it. You've got to compare to other brands or segments to see which individual items have the greatest performance where they are distributed. So in this example here, as we're looking across these three items, we can see that it's actually item C. Although it's not the best-selling item in the category, it wouldn't be at the top of the item rank, it is the most productive where it is listed. So although it has 63% distribution, the lowest of the three that we're looking at here, it drives 14.3 dollars per store per week compared to brand A and brand C. So in theory, what would we do with this information? Well, it gives us a perspective that if we were to expand distribution of item C, that it could drive more sales than potentially other items. So how would we calculate that? We use the sales per point of distribution to calculate an item's potential if we were to increase its distribution amongst a banner or retailer. So let's take that example and figure out what is the distribution opportunity associated with it. So I'm going to add in a number of different elements and calculations here. So if we were to want to calculate the sales potential for each of these items based on increasing their distribution, we would calculate as follows. So we would take what is our distribution target. So if we want to have a 90% distribution across all of our key items, we would then multiply that by the sales per point of distribution to give us a number of potential sales. So if we were to increase item A by 3 distribution points to take it from 87 to 90, we would have an increase of 1,035. Again, this is probably a dollars per store per week measure. It's typically how we would look at it. Now, if we look at the gap and what's the opportunity to actually grow the category, we would then take the potential sales, if we were at our distribution target, minus the current volume, and that would give us our current dollar gap or our current dollar opportunity. So if we were to increase item A to our distribution target of 90%, it would be an incremental $35 per store per week type of calculation. So there are some variables in this scenario, which is the distribution target. Those are things that are strategically set, and they should be set by retailer, by brand, at sort of a higher level. But once you have those distribution targets, you can see which items you should look at potentially expanding your distribution for. So clearly, item C here would probably give us a bigger dollar opportunity if we were to choose to expand distribution on item C. So I've shared with you a couple of key calculations that can bring a lot of insights to your analysis as you're looking at the category tactics. So if you want to pull out that PDF file, if you haven't yet downloaded it from the materials section, if you joined us a little bit late, if you go into the materials section on your go-to training, there is a PDF file with the word exercises in it to walk through some calculations and to look at how can we apply these two measures, looking at share per item, so doing that top line analysis on your assortment, and then looking at sales per point of distribution as a different way of looking at your item level assortment to find specific opportunities. So we're going to start with the first exercise at the top. So there are three cells that have been left highlighted for you to calculate. So for each of the segments in this category, household, specialty, and chargers, use the calculation that's shared in your instructions there and figure out what is the share per item across these three segments. And then we have brands and price segments as well, which I've already filled in your share per item for you. So once you do those three calculations, answer the question below, which is what are the most productive brands and segments, and that would be the ones who have the highest share per item. So I'm going to give you a minute to complete those calculations, and then we'll come back and talk about them. All right, so these are fairly simple and straightforward calculations. I don't want to leave you working on it too long. So here are the answers that we have in terms of what is the share per item across these three segments. So again, this is your dollar share divided by the number of items in that particular segment. So given that, what are the most productive brands and segments or the highest share per item? And if we look across each of these three breaks, we see that the household segment is the most productive with a 1.8 share of items. Brand D would be the most productive, and as well the price segment is the most productive. So as we looked at each of the different segments, that gives us insight now as to where we might want to spend some focus as we then drill down to that next level of data and detail as we're doing our assortment analysis or building out a line review. And so we now know which areas to potentially focus on to be reducing or adding items in this particular category. All right, now the next one, I'm going to give you probably just a little bit more time to complete these calculations. So sales per point of distribution, which is the dollar volume divided by the distribution, will give you your SPPD number across these two items, and then calculate the gap, which is 100. So I'm setting our distribution target here at 100 just to give us a benchmark here. So 100 minus the current distribution multiplied by that sales per point of distribution number that you just calculated. So go ahead and do those calculations. I'll be back in just a second. All right, let's fill in some numbers for you here. So as we're looking at item number one, We have a current distribution of 93%. So this item obviously has really strong distribution. It has a high dollar share at 2.1. So again, remember we're looking at item level, not at a segment or brand level. So 2.1 could be a pretty high share number for this category. Again, we don't have a big long list here, so we're just doing a quick comparison between two items. But based on that current 2.1% dollar share and the distribution that we have of 93 points. So again, the calculation is the dollar volume, 192,000-ish, divided by 93 points of distribution gives us an SPPD number of just over 2,000. And then as we look at the second item that I've chosen here for comparison, it has lower dollar volume, so it's at a 0.8 share. So the dollar volume is at just over 73,000, but it has 61 points of distribution. So if you've followed a sort of more traditional, straightforward way of doing an item level analysis by looking at an item rank report, item number 2 would be much further down the list than item number 1 and probably not much of a focus for you. But by adding in this sales per point of distribution calculation, we know that we have a sales per point of distribution number of just over 1,200 for that item number 2. But we have the potential, if we bring up the distribution, because it's only at 61, that we could add $47,000 in sales to this particular category. And again, this is a dollar sales per store type of number, so multiply that out to get a total impact to your brand or your category. This could be far more significant. So by adding in the SPPD perspective, we can see both how productive each item is based on where it's already in distribution versus the highest ranking items typically having very high distribution. So the numbers are driven by the fact that it's available more broadly everywhere, but you may find that there are some items that are more productive where they're listed than the items that have broader distribution. And then from there you can take it that step further to look at this SPPD gap approach of seeing what distribution opportunities do you have. So when we think about growing our category through distribution, you can either get distribution of brand new items or you can expand distribution of items that you're already currently listing if you're a retailer, or have listed if you're a manufacturer. So there's really two different ways of growing your business through distribution. And oftentimes we focus too much on just that idea of new distribution and really not looking in depth enough into the extent of distribution that we have and the sometimes easier opportunity to expand that distribution of current items. So again, if you haven't been using SPPD as one of your item level calculations and analyses, this is absolutely one of my favorite, and for those who haven't been that I've ever taught live and in person, I love seeing the light bulb moment, the aha, when they see the potential that this can bring to bringing insights into your category. Okay, obviously one of my favorite measures. I spent a lot of time on it. So let's move on to number 3. Number 3 I'm going to talk about is distribution and different ways of looking at distribution. Again, just like as we looked at the item level sales as a total number versus sales per point of distribution, we can look at the distribution measure itself from different perspectives as well, which can also bring different kinds of insight. And so there's two different ways of looking at distribution. It's the percentage of stores carrying or a weighted distribution number, which is the all commodity distribution that you can get from syndicated POS data. So quick definition is, and what do these measures answer? Percentage of stores carrying is based on the total number of stores that are actually carrying the product. So if you have 100 stores in your universe, your banner, your region, whatever it might be, and you have 80 stores carrying the product, you have 80% distribution. When you look at it from a weighted perspective, though, the calculation gets a little bit more complicated, but not by much. But it's based on the importance of each of the stores actually carrying the product. So importance based on dollar volume that they're carrying. So it answers the question, what percentage of total category volume do the stores carrying that item represent? So what does that mean? If you're not used to the difference between a weighted distribution or a percentage of stores carrying, let me walk through it. Again, as I said, it can be available through syndicated POS data. So let me do a quick visual explanation of the difference here. And I'll bring this up so you guys have a chance to actually look at the calculation. So as we're looking at percentage of stores carrying, here's the universe. I just shrunk it by a tenfold. So we're looking at 10 stores now. And if we've got 5 carrying it, we have 50% distribution. Pretty straightforward. So if we take the same example, the same universe of stores, and we add in the sales of each of those stores. So you can see that underneath we added in the first store does 30 million, thousand, whatever number we want to put to it, dollars worth of sales, and we allocate that sales number across each of the stores. We then add up the total sales of each of the stores carrying compared to total sales for the universe as a whole. So in this case, if we were to add up everything covered by the green arrow here, so all 10 stores drive $200 in sales. The first 5 stores, ones that are actually carrying our product, represent $130 worth of sales. And so as we do a different calculation there, we then see that 130 divided by 200 gives us 65%, and this is called an all-commodity distribution. So stores representing 65% of volume are carrying the products that we have. So our weighted distribution measure says that we have distribution in more of the stores that are driving sales. So again, it gives you a different perspective on looking at distribution. So is it more important to get a product into every single store, or is it more important to focus on expanding your distribution into the stores that are driving more of your overall sales volume? Again, great way to drive incremental insights into your category. What is the sum of total store sales? That's the 200 number here. So in the top example, basically everything's worth 1, right? All 10 are worth 1. Add them together, our total is 10. So 5 divided by 10, 50%. Here we're just adding together the sales numbers. So all this 30 through 5 equals 200. I just got another question. Total sales in the category across all stores. This is a super simplified just example of how the calculations work. So these are just very simple numbers to absorb and look at. So when you use all commodity distribution numbers that come out of your actual POS data, you will have numbers that are more representative of what you're used to seeing in your particular category, in thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, whatever size of your category that you're looking at. So again, just a simplified way of explaining the difference between these 2 different ways of looking at distribution. All right, number 4. We're jumping into a different tactic now, and we're going to look at placement or space management. And the tip here is to load sales data into your planograms. And what I'm showing you here are some great examples of quick analysis that really tell a story that can be used to better understand the performance of your shelf sets. And really can be seen as an extension of your category analysis. But when you tie it to how you're actually set up on shelf, it gives you great perspective on this particular tactic. And again, looking at another typical report that comes out that gives you space to performance analysis, and it can break out by the different manufacturers that are on the planogram, and it looks at each of these 4 different measures. So seeing one or more of the four columns with a significant variance really starts to tell you another story. So in this example here that I've highlighted, the manufacturer is really not getting what we would call their fair share of shelf space. And stay tuned for tip number 10. We're going to talk about fair share index. And that's what's indicated here by the yellow column. So the manufacturer has about 37% of shelf space, but represents over 43% of profit, sales, and movement in the category. So again, great perspective, and then we can look across, and if we want to look at this idea of fair share, we can see very quickly which other manufacturers have more than fair share. So I'm going to go back to a question that I asked on first tip, was, is this good or bad? What does this number mean? And tip number 10, where we talk about fair share index, I'll quickly touch on that as well, because we want to tie other things like retailer strategy into determining whether or not this is a good thing. There can be some strategic reasons to under or over represent on different tactics by manufacturer, by brand, by whatever it might be. So again, sales data into your planograms is a really critical way of maximizing the insights that you can get for that particular tactic. Okay, number 5, another one near and dear to my heart, and that is to know your profit metrics. This really just gives you a quick look at what constitutes profit. And there's really a lot of things that go into the equation. So you need to take out your cost of goods sold, and then you have your gross margin. So there's your first step. After that, whoops. Again, I'm click happy. You've got operating expenses. So in this example, we're including things like employee costs, warehouse and store costs, depreciation, and so on. So operating expenses are significant. So we now see a retailer's operating margin at 4%. And then non-operating expenses like financing, taxes, etc., add another 1%. And so we see a net margin of 3%. And so most of you probably know retail tends to operate with net margins in this vicinity. But it's why gross margin and looking at profit metrics is so important to retailers. And it's critical for suppliers to understand, really, in order to be able to consider the business from the retailer's perspective. Looking at profit metrics and looking at the P&L sheet like this isn't necessarily a common occurrence. So I'd like to poll the audience and ask you guys, if you'll bear with me for a second while I get this up on the screen for you. Okay, so the question is, do you leverage profit metrics to better strategically manage your business? So do you regularly use them sometimes or not at all? So I'm going to give a few seconds for everyone on the line here to weigh in. Wow, I don't think I've ever seen our answer bars jump around so much. We've got a lot of variation here, which quite honestly doesn't surprise me. So I'm going to give a couple more seconds for everybody to finish weighing in, and then I'm going to share the results with everybody. All right, a few of you haven't voted yet, but I'm closing the poll, and I'm going to share the results with you. So the question again was, do you leverage profit metrics to more strategically manage your business? And like I said, these numbers jumped all over, but we netted out with almost 100% voting that a third of you, 33%, regularly use them, 53% sometimes, and 13% not at all. And I have to say I'm not surprised by the results based on the experience and work that we do at CMKG with retailers and manufacturers across North America and globally. There are still a number. I would love to dive further and know how much of that 13%, I'm guessing it's mostly manufacturer. Retailers and category managers within retailers tend to definitely be more focused on these metrics, but it's still somewhat surprising how many manufacturers really don't leverage these metrics because they are so critical to the individual category buyer and to the retailer overall, that by incorporating an understanding of profit metrics into your overall category and tactical analysis and strategies really can go a long way to building plans that have impact. Okay, I'm going to remember to hide the results before I move on here. There is so much to cover and to share when it comes to profit metrics. That way too much to cover in something like this. So this one here is really a tip. I'm not adding in any training around it. We do have an amazing course, one of our most popular, called Retailer Economics in the Product Supply Chain, that covers in depth this whole concept. And again, it's one of those tips because it really can have such a broad impact on your category tactics across the board and just collaborative relationships between retailers and manufacturers. Okay, so moving on to number 6. Beware of average price. So I love this
Michelle?
tip because, yes.
Sorry, Michelle, it's Sue here. I'm just wanting to let you know that we can't see your screen right now. You're not sharing anymore.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Love go-to training and the features like polling, but yeah, thank you. All right, I think we're seeing it now. Jump in again if we're not. Average price, so number 6, yes, is a beware, and I love that this is a kind of a warning message because pricing is such a detailed tactic to get into, and there's so many pricing calculations and analyses that can be done. But it's important to understand the average price calculation. So if you have an average unit price at a brand or segment level, it's really a blend of prices across different sizes and types and time periods. So let me show you an example to show you what I'm talking about here. So if we look at this one, you can see that brand A has 3 items of all different sizes and prices. My brand A average price is $7.47. Think about if item 1 grew by 100 units and item 3 declined by 50 units, it would show average prices increasing. But it's actually shoppers switching to a more expensive size. So if we have 3 sort of shelf prices listed here of $8.99, $7.49, and $4.99, if we're looking at average price, we're saying that the price of this brand is $7.74. It's kind of a ghost price that doesn't really exist anywhere because it's this blend of prices. So using average pricing or average unit price at a category, brand, or segment level can lead to incorrect conclusions about the trends that you're seeing in pricing. So one solution is to have an average price per ton or equalized volume or statistical volume. It's got a number of different names to it instead of per unit. And so basically you would assign a value based on that volume. So here we were showing the volume of the items at 4, 16, and 24 ounces. So by using statistical volume, you're able to do some better analysis of average price. And if you only have access to an average unit price, what you need to do is make sure that you're drilling down to unit price at an item level to really understand true pricing trends so that you know if you've actually got inflation or deflation within a category or what's actually happening to drive price trends. So again, if you're seeing just an average price at a brand or segment level, don't trust that it's increasing or decreasing, general conclusion, without digging into it a little bit more. So if we're looking at that calculation here again, you can do this based on TPR or temporary price reduction or regular unit price. So it's another way that your pricing number or your average price can get a little bit kind of muddied again. The more you're averaging out, the less meaningful that price point actually is. So here we're showing that you can actually break it out by average price reduction unit price and average regular sales unit price, which again gives you more perspective both on pricing and then on what promotional volume you're achieving. So you can see significant differences between your promoted price and your regular price. So by averaging these two together, again, it's not a price point that the shopper is really seeing or spending on the product on a regular ongoing basis. Okay, I'm combining tips number 7 and 8 together. So if you guys have printed off the handouts there, you can see that 7 is to understand baseline versus incremental sales. Tip number 8 is to understand promoted versus non-promoted sales. So let me give you some quick definitions here first. Really to understand promotional impact, we often see people using all or some of these measures. So baseline is the normal expected volume for a product in the absence of any kind of in-store merchandising or advertising activities. So this is what you would expect to sell on a day in, day out kind of basis. Incremental sales is the incremental volume for a product based on any of that merchandising activity. Again, the calculation for this typically comes from third-party POS data. But your baseline plus your incremental equals total volume. So I've included a chart here that sort of shows as we look across different weeks, you can show sort of your regular baseline volume in green and then your incremental volume, obviously coming when there is merchandising activity, showing what that volume is. But together they equal your total volume. The other way of looking at promoted volume is by looking at promoted sales, which is the amount sold in stores which had some type of merchandising at any point in time during a period, and non-promoted sales, which would be the amount sold in stores with no merchandising present that week. So if you think about that and relate that to the chart that I have here, you would see week 1 that I'm pointing at would be all promoted sales. Week 2 is likely an all non-promoted sales week. So you can see that baseline versus incremental and promoted versus non-promoted really is a different way of looking at your promotional volume. So I'm going to ask you guys again, because you're sharing such great information, what promotional measures are you using on a regular basis? Is it baseline and incremental, promoted and non-promoted, both or neither? I think we've got every possible combination there, so I'll give you guys a second to weigh in on this one. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to close this one again and hopefully share it with you. I'll still be sharing my screen. So we've got another quite set of mixed results, and oftentimes a lot of companies don't have access to baseline and incremental data. So promoted and non-promoted can be a more common way to potentially look at things. Although judging by the results that we have here, it looks like we have lots of access to baseline and incremental data and using both of them, which is great because if you're using both, you understand the the impact and the potential insights that can come from both of those perspectives. Some neither, which again is not uncommon, but I'm going back to what I said after my last poll, that these are really intense topics in terms of providing some training on each of those measures. We have a fabulous course called Measuring Category Health, Baseline and Incremental Drivers. I think I successfully am sharing my screen again this time rather than turning it off. So again, this one is a tip, more than being able to provide some training in this short time on these particular measures. What's really great about this course, for those of you who said neither or who shared some comments with us that you don't have access to baseline and incremental, this course in particular, and a lot of our courses, really breaks things down to the fundamental way that you can take the strategic approach with the data that you have in your business. So sometimes in certain instances you need to have a particular data or data source, but by no means in all cases. We've got a course called Category Management Unlimited Data, which is another favorite because it gives you those tips and tricks on how to leverage the data you have to still take this approach, because it's a myth that you need to have a full suite of data in order to follow a category management approach. But again, I digress. So moving on to tip number 9. And I apologize for anyone if I'm talking too fast, but like I said, I wanted to cram in as many tips for you guys today as I could. So number 9 is to not start analyzing a tactic in isolation. So I had mentioned in an earlier tip the idea of drilling down through data. And when we started by talking about assortment analysis and starting at that top line level, it was to find the bigger opportunities in the category before diving into more detailed item level. Really the same concept here being applied to your total category. And I've heard so many times, I have to do a pricing analysis because I have pricing issues in my category. And I'll ask the question, well, how do you know you have pricing issues? Well, because I do. But how do you know pricing is what's driving the issue that you have? And so sometimes by elevating the question that you have and really focusing on what is the business issue or opportunity, not the tactic itself at first, by doing this market comparison, by building some benchmarks, and by really analyzing that top line level, it really gives you insights into what is happening in the business overall and where those bigger opportunities lay. And then from there to dive into the tactics, to know what it is that you're solving for, to find out what is it that you're driving, right? We call the tactics sales drivers. So if we know what segments of the business are growing or declining or representing our biggest opportunities, now our tactics are being used to solve for something. And so by following this type of approach, and I'm probably talking out of my slides again here, it really enables you to make your tactical analysis far more impactful because it's focused on particular business issues in action. So the market comparison piece of it in particular, and benchmarking, which is one of our favorite things to do, is because if you're starting with just looking at your own particular results and not benchmarking to the total market to figure out where those opportunities are, you're really missing where your consumer or shopper is shopping elsewhere. So what are those other things that that they are doing? So it really increases your understanding of the gaps and opportunities that exist in the market. And so you may be solving for different business issues or opportunities. So it may not be pricing within your banner. You may have identified that you have a bigger gap versus competition or versus another channel that needs your attention. All right, tip number 10, and again, I referred to this one that I would be getting here because I've talked about the idea of fair share index in one of my other tips. And if you don't use Fair Share Index, again, it's one of those really great perspective measures because it gives you a comparison. But it's also something that needs an extra level of perspective, and that's the strategic perspective that you can apply to it. So first let's talk about what the calculation and the definition of it. So it's a very simple measure used to compare your dollar share to the share of all of your tactics, your tactic activity. So the calculation is brand or segment tactic share divided by your brand or segment dollar share. So if our segment has a 20% share of the category, and our share of shelf, which is where our initial example came from, was 25%. So that 25 divided by 20 equals 125 fair share index. So an FSI, or a fair share index, that's greater than 100 means that product has more support by a given tactic than their share. Now here comes my favorite question to ask. So what? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And here's where, if we didn't have such a large group and had you guys open, I know everyone would be jumping in to say, it depends. And it depends is the correct answer because based on your strategies, you may decide that particular brands or segments should have greater than fair share of the shelf, or they should have less than fair share of the shelf. So 100 shouldn't be the benchmark. Every single brand and segment within a category shouldn't have a target fair share index of 100. So you need to think about strategically where that target should be. A great and very easy example for everyone to understand is share of shelf and one particular brand, and that would be a private label brand. So most retailers choose to give additional support to private label. So you would very often see that a private label brand in a category might have a 120, a 130, whatever it might be, but a higher than 100 target index for share of shelf. Now for all kinds of other strategic reasons, you would choose to set targets or assess your results being over or under 100 based on a number of different strategies. So just to give you a quick example, if we were to look at a category and ground here and instant, referring to coffee. So if we were to look at a couple of different brand in a segment here, we would see that brand C has significantly less support across all tactics relative to dollar share. And so we can then look at that and understand what is brand C. Is it a national brand? Is it a brand that's intended to be convenience or play a different role within the category? What are the strategies behind that? But we can then use that fair share index to drive some plans and some targets for that particular brand to increase their fair share, to decrease it, whatever it might be. And then again, we can look into different segments and look across each of the tactics relative to dollar share. So this would be an example of the data that you would be looking at in examining your FSI. But again, most important thing is to layer on that strategic perspective. Okay, so there's the top 10 list. Assortment should always start with brand and segment level analysis. Leverage SPPD, it's a fabulous measure. Understand weighted distribution. Load sales data into your planograms. Know your profit metrics. Beware of average price. Understand your baseline versus incremental versus promoted and non-promoted. Don't start analyzing a tactic in isolation, and leverage the fair share index. So that was a lot to cover, but I'm happy to share those top 10 tips with you. I'm going to take the next few minutes to share with you a little bit more information about us at CMKG. If you guys have any questions, you know that we've had Sue and Shelley in the background here answering your questions in chat. Thank you very much, ladies. It was a busy group. And if anyone wants to ask a question right now, or Sue, if you want to jump in, if there's anything that we should address on topics or specific questions before or while I jump into this, please feel free to interrupt me. Just a bit of background about us if you're not familiar with who we are at CMKG and what we've been up to for the last number of years. We have been the first company to do a lot of things. So first, e-learning solution in category management, which you saw by the list of courses I shared. It's quite an extensive library that covers everything from foundations to strategic applications. We're the first accredited category management training company in the world. We're the first and still the only to have a retailer-specific accredited training curriculum. You see that today I shared a lot of retailer, manufacturer examples and talked about some of those differences. We really highlight those in our courses, specifically around the workshops and the examples, because they are different perspectives in a lot of cases, even though the content really is still the same. And in terms of new, we are a busy group right now. We have mobile technology and mobile access to our phenomenal resource library. We're developing training specific to the convenience channel and food service, so a lot of our content is really going beyond just accredited training content into all of the areas that our students and clients are really looking for. If you'd like to follow up with us, if you have any questions about looking at a training plan for you or your organization, we very much believe in building a plan that meets your specific needs, organizational needs and objectives. And while content can be standardized, really the right program curriculum and delivery and everything depends on what your specific needs and objectives are. So we have a current best approach based on thousands of students and hundreds of client executions, and what really drives long-term return on investment and long-term capability development. And it's walking through this four-step process with our clients. So really understanding through discovery and consultation what you need, developing the right plan. The implementation, critical piece of it. That also includes a very interactive and managed strategic plan as we work through that. So that's kind of our overall approach in what we do. This is the list of courses that I had shared with you earlier. Sorry, I had something move around on my screen there. But you can see that we have a pretty broad range of topics, and I did touch on a lot of them through those tips today. And some of our new courses, and what a lot of our resources are. So like the workshop you had today, it's sort of a mini version of the downloadable workshops that are part of every single course that we do, and our testing and our additional resources, et cetera, et cetera. I know that we're coming up to the top of the hour and we might be losing some people. So before I get into a lot more detail, I'm actually gonna skip forward to make sure that everyone sees this particular piece. There's a couple of things that that we're doing. One, please stay connected and stay in touch. We have, if you go to our main website, cmkg.org, which is in the middle of the page there, you'll see all of the different ways that you can connect with us through our newsletter, our blog, a lot of the stuff that we share online, our category management learning forum on LinkedIn. We're also attending and sponsoring the CMA conference, the Category Management Association conference, in just a few weeks in Orlando. If you have not yet registered and are thinking about it, you can take advantage of our conference discount, which gets you a 15% discount to their standard rates. And we're also offering you, as an attendee of today's webinar, a special discount code if you wanted to go in and test out any of our courses our programs online at readytolearn.cmkg.org, which is where our online training and resource center is. You can browse our catalog there and use that code if you'd like to. If you have any specific questions, please do reach out to us. We would love to chat with you and connect with you more directly. It was my goal to be done all of that by the top of the hour, but we are staying on. If anyone has any specific questions or things for me to address, as I said, I know Sue and Shelley, you guys have been doing that in the background.